All right, welcome everybody back to the PHLY Sixers podcast. I'm Derek Bodner, joined by a guy who is definitely not unserious, Kyle Neubeck. How you doing, buddy?
I would say I'm pretty unserious, so that's you're being a little more charitable than maybe I deserved there. I'm doing well.
I do feel like we start most of these off picking on each other in some respects, so giving you a little bit of well-deserved and earned props. I feel like that's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, look, it's all for show. Derek and I mostly get along. I do say mostly. There's a little bit of snippiness behind the scenes.
We spend a lot of time together, man. You're gonna run into some bumps and bruises,
especially since we started this company. So it's been on a completely different level since starting this, but I think we're still in serious and not unserious mode.
We're both still alive, so it's going well.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple of updates. Obviously, the unserious is what we're joking about here.
Oh, wait. Are we the PHLY Eagles podcast now? Look at that at the bottom of the screen.
Look, I take that as a compliment. Considering what Bo just wrote today, fantastic.
Oh,
go to allphly.com. He had a good Q&A with players in a way that only Bo could do. All right. So the overall report here, there was a new update from Sam Amick.
There we go. There we got the Sixers banner and everything.
Where he was basically reporting on what the Clippers, what the trade talks between the Clippers and the Sixers. Two sort of bits of news that I think were probably the most relevant. He basically said that the Sixers had indicated that an unprotected first-round pick, a first-round pick swap, salaries to match, and Terrence Mann would get it done. The Clippers reiterated that Mann is off the table, and then Morey, according to Amick, expressed his disbelief and accused the Clippers of being unserious about getting a deal done, before then joking that the Clippers should just trade Paul George if they're so determined to keep their young players. This is something that we've talked about quite a bit.
Which honestly is, I think, a fair counterpoint, by the way. If you're not going to trade the up-and-comers, you got to trade something of value.
You got to trade something. This is something that we have certainly spent a decent amount of time talking about here in the last weeks or month. But it is sort of, honestly, I think my biggest takeaway was that it seems like Daryl's sort of dropping his asking price a little bit. It used to be 2 firsts, a pick swap, and Mann. He dropped that down to 1 first, a pick swap, and Mann. I think Daryl probably feels like, hey, I'm moving here. Why isn't this being met halfway? Clippers are holding their ground firm. Where do you sort of stand on this?
Yeah, so I think because there's been no pushback on this report from the LA side that at least you and I are aware of right now, leads me to believe that this is true, and certainly I trust Sam a good bit in terms of the accuracy of his reporting. So to see it framed like this, where now it's the Clippers, I think we can sit here and say they're the reason this is not getting done. Because I think because of Daryl's track record overall, but also in the Ben Simmons situation where he held out and he held out and he held out and he said, I'm not moving this guy until we're making a deal that improves the title odds or maintains the title odds. It was easy to say this situation with James is, oh, here goes Daryl again. Daryl's overvaluing his guy. He's doing this, he's doing that. But for a really plugged-in reporter to come out and say, hey, look, the offer or the asking price has gone down. He wants 1 real pick, and Terrence Mann would settle for that. You and I have said on the show multiple times, Derek, that if they just gave up 2 picks, forget Terrence Mann, the deal would get done. We're seeing all these signs that on the Sixers side of things, Daryl is trying to get something done. I don't think he wants this to go into the season and deal with this months-long struggle. And I think he believes that if he gets that stuff, he can, if it's not right away, he has confidence he can flip those picks or a pick and man for more stuff before the deadline. And so he's showing some level of urgency from what we can tell. And so now this is strictly on the Clippers to figure something out, because frankly, if you're not willing to trade a pick and man, at that point, it's what are you even doing here? You don't really want James Harden.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I sort of spoke about this on Twitter a little bit. I think a big part of the problem is there's just no reason for the Clippers to concede anything right now. I think if you look at everything that's going on, you know, you've got the Clippers being the only one making an actual offer. You've got James Harden now really applying pressure for the first time after reporting the camp. And you've got Daryl Morey sort of conceding these two things by the fact that, hey, I'm going to drop my asking price. Well, the Clippers have all the leverage. And look, this is all ridiculous because it's Terrence freaking Mann. Like 27, 9
Again,
points
both
per
of
game.
us like Terrence Mann.
Like
I feel
Terrence
bad
Mann.
that we're just dumping on him day after day when his name comes
In
up.
a normal situation, he would not be holding up the trade for a superstar. This is anything but a normal situation. And from Clippers' perspective, truthfully, I don't even know if Terrence Mann is a deal breaker. I just know they don't feel compelled to include him right now when nobody else is really making a serious bid, and they probably won't until one of two things happen. Another team comes into the fold, or the trade deadline comes around where you actually have to make a do I or don't I decision. So the fact that they're holding on to this asset, and he's a fine role player on a good team-controlled contract. He's got, I think, one more year left on his deal.
Yes.
If you're the Clippers, it makes sense. Why would Lawrence Frank give up more? You're not trying to make a fair offer at this point. You're trying to give up just enough to get it done. And I think the Sixers are just more desperate than the Clippers to get this done right now. So I think it makes some sense for them to try to leverage Morey as much as they can. There is risk that if Morey can somehow drag this out to the trade deadline, maybe another team gets into the mix. Maybe the Clippers just get desperate because they know that James Harden is going to bring more to the table in terms of winning a championship this year than Terrence freaking Mann will. So then maybe they will add more than they will. But they just seem very, like, if this has been the offseason of uncomfortable, the Clippers just aren't nearly as uncomfortable as the Sixers. So I don't really think it comes down to, like, would you give up Terrence Mann for James Harden? It's just there's one team that feels pressured and there's one that doesn't. Unfortunately, we're the ones that have to talk about the team that feels pressured all day, every day. And we're stuck in a circle of hell.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of people sounding off in the chat. I wanted to highlight Miles Johnson had a question. Are the personal reasons legit? And so for anyone playing catch up, we show up to practice today. The Sixers send out not a release, but a text to a lot of the people who cover the team regularly saying that James was not at practice and was excused he's away from the team due to a personal matter. I would say this. I'm going to be very careful in how I say this. I can't sit here and tell you at this very moment that there's nothing that Harden's dealing with away from the floor, right? Like there very well could be something within his family, with friends, whatever that is on his mind that's occupying some of his time. But I think Nick Nurse's answer that he gave when asked about James today was the dead giveaway, where Nurse started by saying, I think the organization has made it clear what's going on. They're working on stuff, as we say, day by day. So even if there is some stuff going on with James that is not public information right now, obviously if there is, then I hope for the best for him and his loved ones or whatever. But I think the main thing and the main reason that James is not here all comes down to the same stuff we've been talking about since we launched the show in mid-September, and that's the contractual dispute and the problems he has with Daryl Morey.
I mean, look, it would be one hell of a coincidence to just 2 days before the first or the final preseason games. Doesn't mean coincidence can't happen, but I think, like you said, Nick Nurse's answer certainly tilts you in one direction. It is sort of interesting that it almost seems like James Harden and his camp are like, yes, I'm going to be a problem, and the Sixers are like, no, everything's fine. He's legitimate personal reasons. It's a little backwards. You would typically expect the team to try to hold him to account, but this is the Sixers the Sixers are that, dog in the fire meme saying this is fine, trying to convince the world that they're not actually being leveraged.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of people are very angry, as you would expect right now. Reginald says, miss me with the leverage talk. If they wanted the man, they'd give up man. And, a little bit of a play on words.
If we were at the trade deadline, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Right now, they're trying to keep. And by the way, I don't think Daryl Morey thinks Terrence Mann's the difference between him and a championship either. He views him as a positive trade chip and something he can then flip down the line. It's trying to get every asset you can, because I think both teams realize they're not, like, this isn't the final trade of their season. This isn't the final trade before winning a championship. It's just asset management, and one team feels like they have more leverage.
I do kind of side with that stance, though. Like, look, we can sit here and say they're going to play this out to the deadline, they're the only real suitor, on and on and on and on and on. I still think we have gotten into it a little bit. It's really hard. If the Clippers are going in for James thinking this guy's the final piece, the guy who will tie things together, help us win a title, gives us some regular season stability as Kawhi and PG are in and out of the lineup. It's better for them to get him sooner rather than later and to get him into the ecosystem and start building. Because look, as we've seen, we saw James Harden and Joel Embiid build offensive chemistry right away, right? But they didn't build meaningful chemistry, things, ways that you could win against top-level teams in the playoffs until basically a year and a half spent together. Or maybe not a year and a half, a year and a few months. But it took them time to get to the level that they can go out and win a title. And maybe that doesn't matter because he goes there and James on some nights can be option 3 rather than option 2 and the clear option 2 in Philly. But I just don't believe you can drop a guy who historically has been, I play this way and this style, and I might make some changes, but overall my game is my game. To add him to this team that already is like an ISO ball, give the ball to Kawhi team in the playoffs, James would have to figure out what the hell he's going to do in that kind of environment, and that's going to take time.
So I think a couple things. First of all, I don't think they necessarily view him as we get this guy and we're title favorites. I think it's worth a shot to take because he has the talent, but maybe that shot isn't necessarily worth mortgaging everything. Like I said, Daryl Morey speak, it can increase your title odds without making you the favorite and still be worthwhile. I think they probably view it like that. I agree. If they viewed him as, man, if we get this guy, then everything's in place and we're title favorites, they'd probably just pay the extra and get it done now. And also, I think Harden is easier to integrate with Paul George, with Kawhi, than he was with Embiid a couple years ago. I see them playing a lot like the Boston Celtics of years past, where you just run pick and roll, get to switch, attack what you want. That's easier to integrate, I think, than it is with a big man like Embiid, who's never really been a role threat and has got to really learn that. And it's not like the Embiid-Harden pairing was bad their first year after a month and a half together. It just wasn't at their apex. I think this would be easier for the Clippers. And also, I think they probably just don't believe that this guy's a surefire, man, if we get this, we're set. Just this might be a worthwhile gamble. And for a worthwhile gamble, you want to save every asset you can get. I understand both sides. On the one hand, I'd love to be wrong, and I'd love for this to get resolved quickly because I'm just frankly sick of talking about it. On the other hand, I understand it from the Clippers' perspective too, because I do think like they have 3 guys, if they get Harden, 3 guys who are older, who are injury prone, who are uncertain. You want assets if you need to make another move or if you just want to keep that role player to have around on a cost-controlled team. I get all of it. Unfortunately, I just feel like the Clippers have a little more leverage and they're not desperate enough to get Harden at this stage.
Yeah, I just also think, like, set aside running plays and all the other stuff, I think what we've seen increasingly over the last, let's call it, decade or so, is that, and certainly in the team that won the title last year, is that the more reps you can get together, not even just on the floor, but to build the off-court stuff and the familiarity and to go through, frankly, some tough times together. Maybe it's a tough time in December that you get through a stretch of injuries for Kawhi and PG and James leads them, or James is out and the other guys pick up the slack. Like the collective adversity you go through over the span of multiple seasons, but in this case it'd be a year. I don't think that you can accelerate that, really. That's not stuff that you can just wake up one day and, hey, we're resilient now. We have our identity that we fall on when the chips are down. And I think we've seen that with the Sixers over and over again because they've changed the roster and the pieces around Joel so many times now with different stars. And I know that Ben was a long-term guy within that kind of thing, but we've seen the consequences of they get to the playoffs at times and it's like, okay, option 1 failed. What the fuck do we do now? And maybe some of that's coaching, but some of that is also the constant turnover that they've gone through. I think, anyway.
Go ahead and do your pay the bills, and then I'll respond to that.
So we'll take a quick break to talk about a few of our friends. Let me just scroll and be a real professional here and do it live. Okay, so I want to tell you guys about some very attentive friends that we have at Soul Savvy. And when I say attentive, I signed up for Soul Savvy, I want to say week and a half ago or so. And at certain levels, you get access to a premium Slack and direct feedback and communication from the Soul Savvy team. And those guys have sent me a bunch of DMs asking me, hey, are you interested in this shoe? Are you interested in this shoe? How can we help you with your experience? And have you been out of the sneaker game for a while? Well, Soul Savvy's been around since 2018, and their mission is the same for me as it would be for you. It's getting sneakers into the hands of people who love them the most. It's a sneaker community that operates in Canada, the US, and the UK. 3 membership levels: basic, mobile plus, and premium. Premium is what I have. The premium membership includes mobile plus features, which is for the sneakerhead who's always on the go. You build a rotation of sold out sneakers straight from your phone. And if you go up to that premium level, the sneakerhead like me, for example, who is tired of paying resale prices to get their hands on the latest sneakers and the latest sneaker releases, find your grails, grow your collection in the world's biggest paid sneaker community. And I have to tell you, the platform is cool. The supplementary apps that they have are really cool. There's a marketplace, Collect, that you can go into and buy dead stock sneakers at essentially retail prices, which pretty rare these days. And I've really appreciated that as someone who's been, frankly, priced out of the sneaker market for quite a long time now. So what I need you guys to do is to sign up for Soul Savvy by visiting soulsavvy.com/allcity or by downloading the Drops by Soul Savvy app. We do have I believe it's a special link for Soul Savvy with a PHLY code on the end, but unfortunately, I can't see that tiny font in there. But there is a QR code on your screen. You sign that QR code, that'll take you to where you guys need to go. So shout out to our friends at Soul Savvy. Hope you guys can get your hands on some sneakers just like I will in the weeks to come.
It is links.soulsavvy.com/PHLY.
There you go, Derek. Thank you very much.
I've got it up on my screen.
All right. So now I also have to tell you about our good friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. The NFL season going strong. Thursday Night Football tonight. You want to put down some new wagers. And DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking new customers up with an offer that's even stronger. Bet $5 on any game this week to score $200 instantly in bonus bets. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this October. Get into game day greatness. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code PHLY. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets when you bet $5 on the NFL. That's code PHLY, only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensee partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles, Louisiana. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
Soul Savvy have Skechers?
I do not believe I've seen Soul Savvy
Who knows? Maybe that
boosting
will
Skechers,
change.
but that could change in the future as they get more into the athletic brand market. I have been hunting for Nikes, Jordans, and honestly, we were talking about this before the show, Derek. New Balance has some cool lifestyle stuff now. I never thought I'd be chasing any New Balance sneakers, but we shall see what the newest the latest and greatest releases are from them.
So I guess my only other point, wrapping up sort of that segment, certainly there's benefit to getting Harden in early. You know, I do think that it is tough to integrate someone like Harden midway through the season. You know, I think there is some, I don't call it survivorship bias, but a little bit like that where like if you were a team that needs a primary perimeter creator, then you were probably a flawed enough team where the odds of winning a title were low. Now, the Clippers are a little bit in a different spot because they create so much from their wings, but still, a lot of times, like when you're looking for someone of this caliber midway through the season, you have a flawed team. So I don't necessarily think all of that noise, I think there might be some noise in the midseason acquisitions, never win a title thing. I do think Harden specifically is a little tougher. I do think it is easier with the Clippers than it would have been with Embiid. But I'm just not sure how much of a difference acquiring him in late October makes compared to acquiring him in mid-December. And if the Clippers feel like with everything that's going on with Harden, skipping, practice, going home to Houston or wherever he's at right now for his personal reasons, if they feel like this could materially change their leverage or at least their Morey's willingness to make a trade, it makes sense to wait it out now. Now, maybe that means if Morey hasn't softened his stance by mid-December, maybe then they change their approach. But But I do think a couple more weeks, maybe even a month more of this, it makes more sense for the Clippers to want to do this than it does for the Sixers. I just don't think there's a huge difference. And then them integrating him now when camp is already over, like if it was like in terms of like upping their offer in July or something when they had a chance to really plan it, yeah, maybe they should have been willing to give up more then. But now that we're here, it makes sense for me for them to wait.
Wow, Jeremy Sochan in the chat today. That's pretty amazing. NBA player along with us. Jeremy asked, do you feel like the Sixers have additional incentive to bend and make this trade sooner than later? Because if the Clippers start slow, they might not decide to go all in at all. So I wouldn't worry about that. If in that scenario, if the Clippers start slow, I think they're so pot committed at this point between the new arena and the age of the guys that they have that if they're not going all in, they might as well trade Kawhi and trade PG and just say, we're starting over and completely reimagine their team. Now, the risk I think that Derek and I would probably agree with is maybe they just say, not James, we'll trade for Malcolm Brogdon, or we'll trade from guy on another team who might shake loose in the next, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. I think that's the danger of not getting a deal done. The Sixers are in a position where the market is so limited that they can't go to LA and be like, oh, well, if you walk away from the table, he might go to the Knicks or the Heat tomorrow. Because, the Heat have come out through their reporters and basically said there is absolutely zero chance that guy's coming there. And frankly, if you're just talking about on-court fit, forget all the culture and other stuff, James makes a lot more sense there than most other guys they could try to acquire. And that's the type of player Miami needs right now. But so far, they've expressed not even zero interest. The opposite. They've said, screw that guy. We don't want him.
Right. Yeah. There's certainly risk on both sides. We'll see. We've spoken so much about this. I'm not sure what else to add. Pivoting on to the next one, you had a report on allphly.com about the Sixers hiring former Trailblazers exec Neil Olshey as an executive. Why don't you walk us through what you know?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to point out that there's a Harden connection here. We'll get to that in a second. What I was told, I reported on this morning, Neil Olshey was brought on to the Sixers in June or so and was with them through pre-draft process, in free agency, has been involved with the team essentially since then. There was a thought that maybe he'd be out at Summer League and talking with people, mingling with the rest of the NBA, and his consultant gig with the Sixers might turn into maybe a full-time gig elsewhere, but seems like he's going to be around for a while now. He's going to be continued to operate out of the Pacific Northwest because his previous job was in Portland. I believe for the time being, his focus is going to be on scouting and mostly at the college level. I think if you go back through his tenure in Portland, those would be his big wins, would be the finds that he got in the draft. Obviously, the big ones are Dame, CJ, and Anthony Simons, probably to a lesser extent. And then there was a decent second-round track record there, guys like Will Barton, Pat Connaughton. Unfortunately, and I wrote this in the story, a lot of the second-round success stories they had turned into success stories for other teams who acquired them.
Right.
And Olshey's biggest weaknesses, as far as I can tell as an executive, were mostly on the trade front, right? It's trying to take the first-round assets and the young talent that they did have and packaging that stuff for ready-made guys to play next to Dame. And they operated in this middle ground where you're trading for guys like Aaron Aflalo or Trevor Ariza, like good players, good NBA role players, but they were not needle movers, and they were not going to be the difference between Dame and CJ losing in the first or maybe second round and Dame and CJ winning a title. It's just maybe they have a better regular season record. They're still not a real contender. Yeah. And so I think those concerns with Olshey as an executive, you don't have to worry about as a consultant because it's essentially just, hey, what do you think of this prospect? Can you get some dirt on this guy? Olshey, prior to being with the Blazers and the Clippers, actually worked at essentially the high school training level. Right. I believe he had some sort of relationship with Arn Tellem way back in the day when Arn was still an agent rather than in the NBA world. So all that is to say that he's going to help on the scouting side. Now, the big concern, the reason he didn't have a job, or one of the reasons he was ousted in
He
Portland.
was also a mediocre GM, so there's multiple reasons.
He was.
But this was the catalyst.
Did not have a great tenure, but the catalyst for his end in Portland was there was an investigation into workplace conduct. The results of that are not public, but there's reporting out there that suggested that he was a bit abrasive and screamed at a lot of people. Not being in a leadership role, I think the Sixers don't think that's really,
right.
I don't want to say not relevant, but it's not as important as it would be if he was being hired for, like Elton Brand's job or Daryl Morey's job. And he has gone through, according to people I spoke with, some executive coaching. So, leadership school type stuff to maybe hammer out some of that abrasiveness that he passed on to people. So as far as I can tell, it's just another voice in the room to give them, a more complete picture on whether it's scouting, whether it's teams on the West Coast that maybe they're not as close to. He can give them some insight on that. And I don't think there's much downside to it because at the end of the day, it's still Daryl and Elton who are calling all the shots.
Yeah. I think certainly he has a very mixed track record, and I think that's probably a polite way of phrasing that. The strongest part of that track record is unquestionably the draft. If that's what they're bringing him in to do, it makes a little bit of sense. You don't have to worry about whatever, team culture he set. He's not going to be doing that here. There are aspects of that investigation that would be more pertinent, but you assume that they had access that we didn't. But in terms of, most of his mistakes, the signings, the trades, he's not going to have a final say. He may not even have a huge voice in it. It makes sense to bring him in for his draft experience because they have had a number of successes during his run. Later on in the draft, I think it's probably much ado about nothing. Like, I don't think he's going to have a big enough role where he can really, really the only way he can do is help. Like, if his experience helps prevent them from making a mistake, great. But I don't think he's going to have the influence to talk them into that much of a mistake either. It ultimately comes down to Daryl Morey and Elton Brand. That's true. I, generally speaking, don't mind getting a little more experience in here with the acknowledgement that we don't truly know what was in that report that ended up causing him to leave Portland.
Yeah. So, and I do want to point out as well, I wrote this in the story, but the Sixers have lost some experience in the draft department over the last, call it like year and a half. Vince Rosman, who was longtime draft guru for them.
And if you're a draft guru, that's the place to go.
Yeah. He went to the Oklahoma City Thunder last offseason, and Vince had been with the organization for, I want to say, 16, 17 years, started as an intern, worked his way up and worked across. So to come in 2006 and be with the draft team until 2022, from an intern up to like the guy running everything in terms of scouting, that tells you what people think of Vince. So losing him to Oklahoma City last offseason was probably a bigger deal than I think people have talked about, just having to replace there's just a lot of institutional knowledge.
The number of front offices that he's seen through, like, talk about a survivor.
Yeah. So to lose him, they needed to make up for some experience that they've lost. And so whatever you say about Neil, plenty of experience around the league, guy with draft expertise, not saying that he's coming in to fill Vince's shoes or anything, but you make up for it in different ways, different scouting hires. And to have a guy that has, multiple decades of NBA experience on top of what he had prior to even entering the league, I think it's undoubtedly good as long as they think all the personal and personality stuff checked out.
Ronald in the chat giving us grief for our shirt choices. What's up with that?
Wait, you don't like the hoodie, Ronald? I got a compliment.
He's trying to figure out which one of us has a more annoying shirt. I've definitely worn way worse than this on the show.
Admittedly, I think it was Will the one day, who Will is, constantly singing my praises in the chat, and I love him for that. But he said that he loved my hoodie, I think, the one day. So this is not the first time, Ronald, but if it's your first time seeing it, you better get used to it, because I bet you I'm going to wear it again.
I'm going to be very annoying on this show. That's just part of the charm. All right, we'll move on. Before that,
actually, one quick thing: the Harden connection to Olshey. So before Olshey was in the league, he operated a call it like an independent scouting and training service that he had connections to Arn Tellem. And I believe Harden was coming up as that business was in full swing out in LA. And I don't know if they crossed paths at Harden's high school, but Olshey was a coach at the same high school Harden attended at one point. So he is I would say, of league executives who didn't work directly with a player, he's closer with James than most people in the league.
Don't think that's going to offset the Daryl and
I don't think so either.
Kelly
because he has been here since June and it hasn't changed anything.
Right. But I suppose we can factor that in as well. All right, quick word from Game Time. Like I said, I truly think Citizen Bank Park is just the best home field advantage in sports. It's a communal sporting event that is almost unmatched. You're going to want to be there. Game Time is the way to do that. Use Game Time to make sure you can get the best deal possible on what will be expensive, but I truly think worthwhile tickets. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. And get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set, with tickets sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So moving on, I suppose, unless you have anything else to add on Olshey.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, not as much about Olshey, but there's a lot of pushback in the chat, or I should say chatter, about management and the mistakes that have been made.
My shirt looks like a psychiatric eye chart. What are you talking about? What does that mean?
Stay on subject over there, Bodner. So there's a lot of debates on who is at fault. And Dave brought up that the Jimmy and Tobias moves destroyed the team's assets. I think the problem with those moves is predominantly that you traded for Jimmy and then let him walk, and then you had to go multiple more years and spend more assets to get somebody who got close to that.
Asset-wise, the Jimmy trade was fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. The problem is you let him out the door, and not that you targeted because he wanted to go to Miami, but you got Josh Richardson. I was calling him Jason. He was on a team for a year, and I never did that. You got Richardson back in return. I'll make it easy on myself, who didn't fit at all. No, the Jimmy trade itself was fine. You just had to be willing to, live with. The
Tobias trade's a different story.
Yeah, Tobias trade was terrible right from the start. I didn't like that at all. Look, I think some people are trying to give Rosman blame for some of the missed drafts. Some people in the chat are trying to, give Brand grief, certainly. To me, it always falls to the person on the top. Like, it's a little bit sketchy when you're talking about that era because it was a little uncertain.
Who actually was on the top at times, yeah.
But before that, that's Brian Colangelo. He's the one you're going to have 20 different perspectives being aggregated into one person. And we don't know where, Rosman stood on Okafor or Fultz or any of that stuff. That falls down to Hinkie and then Colangelo and then Brand, assuming he was in charge and making the final call. And now Morey. The buck stops with the guy making the most money. There's a reason he's making the most money.
Think of how differently things could have been if the Tobias trade just simply never got made. If we just sit here and say, okay, they traded Dario and Cove, and it was Bayless's contract, right, for Butler, and that's all you gave up, and you have Jimmy and at the time Ben still close to peak value. Joel's on the ascent. Joel and Jimmy had obviously developed chemistry and friendship and all that. You have all the assets that you wouldn't have traded for Tobias. You could combine that with Ben and turn that into, maybe some killer wing and wherever you want to go with it. It was that second move, and then the decision, more importantly, not to keep Jimmy. and sign Al Horford and give Tobias $180 million. That's where they went wrong. Trading for Jimmy at the time was about as low risk as it was going to get.
Yep.
They traded guys who, Derek and I liked. We liked Dario. We liked Cove. They were good role players, but turning that into Jimmy Butler was an absolute
100%.
no-brainer. And if that is where Elton had stopped, maybe they don't go to the wire with Toronto in round 2. We don't know how that season plays out and how the team ultimately looks when they get there. But that move was a slam dunk. It's everything else that came after that really screwed them.
Yep. Anyway, going back to 2023. This was maybe some of the most shocking news we've heard in a long time. A report out that Joel Embiid will sign with Skechers to help launch their which report do you think I was going to?
It's just I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. I understood where you were going with it. It was
they've signed some notable athletes over the last couple of years, none in basketball. You're more the sneakerhead than I am. What was your thoughts on this? And I don't even think it's been officially confirmed yet outside of Shams.
I think it's still technically like
we certainly haven't seen
I don't think it's pen to paper.
Right.
I think it's a trial period the deal is contingent on him actually wanting to wear the shoes, which I was reading up about. Harry Kane, British soccer player, plays for Bayern Munich, used to play for Tottenham. He just signed a big deal with Skechers where I actually saw the process behind getting him into a signature shoe. He wore a lot of plain black and plain white, no logo cleats for the span of about a month. I would suspect we might see some on Joe during maybe Friday's preseason game, early season. But I'm of two minds about it. One, I think we've seen maybe non-basketball, even non-sport brands in recent years pivot into new lines, and they hire away people from Nike and Adidas and all the other top of the sneaker market companies. And they turn into, good athletic brands. So like New Balance is a great example. Maxi is one of their big clients right now. And New Balance has turned into a great kind of sneaker company for people who not even into basketball, just like athleisure. I hate that word, but athleisure type of brand. And they've changed what people think about them. So I think Skechers probably looks at this and says, okay, we can get big name, big personality NBA player. We're going to throw the bag at them. We'll get a couple more guys. We'll round out the portfolio. And they do seem to be investing a ton of money in this. And so the hope would be if you're the Sixers and the people who root for them, it said, whatever, it doesn't really matter, but they'll put Joel in a good shoe, and that's all that really matters. And nobody really cares about how much money Joel is making other than Joel. My concern would be being the guinea pig for sort of a new line and a new department entirely for a guy who's got a history of injury problems is a little bit scary. At least when he went to Under Armour, that was a growing, Steph was already there, and Steph had come from that horrible series of ankle issues, and they personally designed this shoe and blah, blah, blah. And there is no real proof of concept for Skechers as a basketball brand. And so that's what I would say is like when Grant Hill went to Fila back in the day, for example, and his body completely fell apart, that might have happened even without being at Fila. But you always wonder, like, if he was just in, Reebok or Nike or whatever, would the same thing have happened?
Then again, didn't Zion blow up a pair of Nikes? Was it Nike?
I don't remember what type of shoes he blew up. Zion could have blown up any pair of shoes at the explosiveness. Yeah. So anyway, the point being, it could just be nothing, and it's like a nice bag for Joel. But I would say there are at least slight concerns about being the first guy in at a new brand.
I'm sort of going to assume that they can put the R&D in to make a good shoe. I'm sure whatever they're selling you is probably going to be slightly different than the one he puts on. But it just blew my mind.
Picturing Skechers as a real athletic brand is wild to me.
It's going to take some work to make Skechers cool. It's going to take a little bit of work.
Well, and here's the other thing. Big men don't historically sell sneakers. So I'm glad for Joe that he's getting the bag. But I mean, Shaq, who's a great player and a dynamic personality, his shoes didn't really sell. I mean, there were Ewings. There were, I want to say there were Hakeem shoes, but that might be wrong. I know there were Ewings and some other big guys that they don't ever sell. So I don't know.
Yep.
It's a big bet on a pretty risky proposition, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, you are certainly more attuned to that market. I do not necessarily track athletes and their shoe deals and the impacts of them. It was definitely a bit of a head scratcher.
And we have some people bringing up Big Baller Brand, which obviously not a actual, legitimate giant corporation in the way that Skechers is. But if you look at Lonzo and how his career went to, his knees are shot at this point. That would be the worry, is that you go down that path. Now, I think Skechers is a little more above board,
a little more reputable, yeah,
to say the least, than Big Baller Brand. But you never truly know. So
we have some jersey news.
Oh boy,
this got leaked out. It was Franklin, right? That was showcasing the new City
Franklin,
Edition jersey.
But also a lot of. So, do you want to get into the backstory of the jerseys themselves?
Sure.
They're supposed to be Reading Terminal Market themed.
Okay.
I don't really.
I love Reading Terminal Market. I'm not sure it's worth putting on a jersey, but I do enjoy the location.
I'm trying to send a link to our producer Bree so we can. Oh, look at that! She's already got. So I don't think they're terrible, is what I would say about these jerseys for anybody looking at our wonderful visual aid that we have right there. What I would say is that they're. And I said this in our Discord that our diehards have access to. I just think they're aggressively mediocre, and they really should be striving for something more than that. Even if it's, look, you can shoot for the moon and end up crashing and burning, and it might be miserable and ugly. I'd have more respect for that than just another City of Brotherly Love. It's red, white, and blue, and there's not a whole lot of inspiration behind it. I would say.
It did almost look like they were shooting for something that wouldn't be dunked on, and they just came with something that was completely inoffensive. And because of that, it's not my least favorite City Edition jersey they've ever had, but it's also nowhere near the top. And these City Edition jerseys are so weird because on the one hand, the whole purpose of them is so you can cycle them out every year to, frankly, generate jersey sales and to have a little bit of fun with it. But on the other hand, sometimes they just get a good one like the Spectrum ones. I'm like, just keep that for a couple of years. And that's, the opposite of sort of like the stated goal
I've
of
been
the City
saying
Edition.
On those Spectrum. I said on Twitter today, white Spectrum jerseys. It's the easiest. Like, you don't even have to change anything but the color. So everything else stays.
I feel like most years I'm going to be annoyed at the City Edition jerseys. But if that means they change the main jerseys a little less frequently than the other, although they change the main jerseys too, so I don't even know what to give them credit for. I feel like most years...
Nothing. They get credit for nothing.
I feel like most years I'm going to be annoyed at the City Edition jerseys with an occasional like, oh, that one's actually really nice. It's probably hard to come up with a new design every freaking year. These are not a home run.
So there's also, because I had a take on these immediately, I got pushback from the team, as you might expect. Like, this is
all the things that have pushback.
Of course, yeah. There's a whole process behind it, and this concept specifically was allegedly in the works for 2 years, which that to me is even more disappointing. If that takes 2 years,
and hire me as a designer.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, I understand you can't just like wake up in July and say, hey, we want to do these jerseys and Nike's going to make them. Like, that's not how it works. And I get that. And there's got to be a back and forth. And I'm sure that there's a level of frustration for a lot of people with the team, because you and I both know former Sixers president Chris Heck was on the record as a we're not doing the Allen Iverson black Sixers jerseys.
And we've been speculating that with him gone now, maybe they would lean into it.
And I will say this. I do know that there are, let's call them important, air quotes, people in the organization who are actively pushing to get those black Iverson jerseys made and for those to be brought back. But it hasn't happened yet. And even as like Derek and I historically have been dissenters on those, we like them maybe less than the general public. But at this point, man, it's like, how many of the same type of jersey can you make?
Right.
It just feels uninspired, and you might as well give the people what they want. And quite frankly, I was thinking about this earlier. You imagine they wait another couple of years, Joel requests a trade, and they drop these at a time when they
Nobody
have no
cares.
clear star that people want to buy the jersey of. Like Maxi's been moved on, Joel's been traded, whatever happens, and it's like some 18th pick in the draft is the top selling. You got to strike while the iron is still at least warm. I won't say hot because we know what the temperature of the fan base is right now.
We've got Marty Bones in the chat calling them Boathouse 2.0. They're not that bad.
No.
And I think that's the whole point. They played it so safe that they can't be that bad, but they also can't be one that we go in a couple of years like, oh man, remember those Spectrum jerseys? They're not going to be that either. All right. And again, as always, have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll flag them, talk about them here in this last segment. Before that, a quick word from FOCO. FOCO is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise, with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. It's the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms, and with it being football and tailgating season, it means that overalls, hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for a game, FOCO has. And FOCO has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. FOCO always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use our promo code PHLY for 10% off.
I just want to, so people are talking about the Boathouse jerseys in the comments. That remains, and this team has made a lot of mistakes in recent years, remains one of the most baffling self-inflicted wounds of all time, where there was that jersey had more initial promo and hype build up than any of the other City Edition jersey they've done. They teased that it was going to be a black jersey. And so the whole fan base is like, yeah, they're bringing back the Iverson jerseys. And then they put these out, and it's a concept that nobody likes. And then Chris Heck comes out and says, this is about new Philadelphia. And essentially he's saying, we don't give a fuck what the fans think. This is what I want. That was just like, what a colossal failure that whole thing was.
I agree with Ed Wright in the chat. He's saying that he's been an art director. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen. I would almost guarantee there are way too many cooks in the kitchen on a decision like this.
And maybe not even the Sixers. That might be Nike as well.
That jersey probably went through 100 different iterations, and who knows what some of the others look like. I'll guarantee you that's true.
Yeah, let's just say that Derek and I will not be advocating for any Boathouse Row throwback merch from the PHLY locker crew.
I do not have one in my closet. It's true story.
So yeah,
actually, I think probably the last Sixers jersey I bought would have been AI. Probably, I think
that's probably honestly the only Sixers jersey.
What's the last
owned.
jersey you bought?
Jersey. I don't really wear. I've never been a jersey guy in general. I like to have takes on them, obviously, but I'm not exactly like closet full of. Oh, actually, that's not true. No. I didn't buy this one. I have a Barcelona jersey that I got as part of a press tour I did in Miami for Real Madrid Barcelona. Is not really journalism, but I got a free jersey out of it, and I actually wore that the day I got engaged in Spain. So that was, kind of a full circle moment. Yeah.
There you go. I have a Harper powder blue. And then I have
those powder blues are beautiful.
I have an Utley with the 08 championship patch on the side. And I think those might be the last two jerseys I bought.
I've never been a baseball jersey guy. I always feel weird.
I've never been a basketball jersey guy because I just I'm not going to wear that outside. Baseball jerseys.
You don't go to a lot of music festivals with other white guys, I guess, because that's like the staple. Honestly,
I'm much more of a Shershey guy anyway. Like that.
That's fine. I have if anybody in the chat, I'm sure some people have seen He Got Game, the movie with Denzel and Ray Allen. I have a Lincoln High School Jesus Shuttlesworth jersey that is like, if you as a white dude wear that to a concert, it's like all these people just surround you like, oh my God, bro, that's sick. And it's like not the intent. But
I also have I don't know where it is, but I have a Jameer Nelson St. Joe jersey.
That's a good one.
Especially like being around at the time, them going through that run, just an incredible small school. It was just a
hey,
wild
look at
season.
that. Kickflip says, greeting from a Sixers fan from Barcelona. That's wonderful to hear. We have fans from Spain. I will say Barcelona was one of my favorite places I've ever been. I hope eventually, Kickflip, that they finish Sagrada Familia because it was a beautiful church, even as a not really religious person. But they've been trying to build that thing for 175 years or something like that. So I'm not holding my breath on that one.
We have a poll going on in the chat on the thoughts on the new City Edition jerseys. 83% hate them. So again, for the angry Sixers staffers that reached out to Kyle, this is why I don't put some of those takes on Twitter, by the way. Angry Sixers staffers that reach out to Kyle, it's not just us. It's not just us. All right. Did we see any real questions that we wanted to flag?
2-minute warning asked, what do you guys think about Darius Bazley? Liked him before he signed with the Nets. So I'd say on paper, earlier in the offseason, I think I would have been more willing to give him a shot, at least look at him in preseason training camp. But with Oubre on the roster now, I kind of don't see the.
Yeah. I mean, he's been mildly interesting. He was mildly interesting when he came out and played for the Thunder for the first couple of years. He just never really put it all together. If you're talking about as a minimum guy instead of Trez, sure, sign me up. But I'm not going to give a full-throated endorsement. I do think in terms of a non-shooter, unless you're going to play him as a really undersized center, he's just not a good enough shooter.
And he has played a bunch of that over the last few years or so.
He's pretty far undersized. He's just not been a good enough shooter. I think it would be hard to really, again, maybe as a third string, super undersized athletic center, sure, but I'm not going to, bang the drums for him here.
Yeah, look, again, it would have been a guy you take a flyer on and say, oh, he's interesting, and use air quotes around interesting. But as far as a signature skill at this point, doesn't really have one. And so he's been in the league since 2019. At this point, you need a guy to have a real role or niche or something that you can say that's a bankable.
Yep.
It's the reason that Jaden Springer hasn't been a rotation guy up to this point because, well, he has had a bankable skill in that he can defend, but on offense, there's been nothing there. Yep. And so if you don't have one thing that you can do well on offense that a team can rely on you for night to night, it's hard to justify playing them real minutes.
I agree. One from Marty Jones here that I wanted to flag. What was the Sixers' plan if Harden didn't opt in?
To pay him?
Yeah. No, I think
it's pretty simple.
I truly think they wanted to bring him back, probably for more than 1 year. I think we were talking about a 2 or 3 year deal. I don't know exactly what the per year figure was, but I think like we talked about this the other day, I think the best case scenario for the Sixers was you piss off James Harden to start free agency. He still opts out, goes out, finds there isn't a bigger market for him, then he comes back to the team with his bird rights. I think that was probably what they were expecting to happen. I think if that would have happened, they had a chance to avoid some of this. They didn't in any way predict that he would opt in and come back under that 1 year. And I don't think Daryl expected him to take that cold shoulder as emotionally as he did. And that's probably his biggest miscalculation there. There is still a part of me that thinks even if they communicated the fact that he wasn't getting a max ahead of free agency, he still would have been upset and probably just as upset as he currently is. But at least that's one less factor on the table. I think probably the right way to play it is to communicate, hey, we're going to make you a competitive offer. It's not going to be what you like. You're free to go out on the open market and see if you can beat it, but we want you back. That might have played better, but I still just worry that without a max, at least on a yearly figure, if not the max years as well, James might have been pissed off. It's just he wouldn't really have an option after becoming pissed off if he opted out.
Hold on. In the non-question division, we have Vince in the chat saying, remember when Morey reportedly asked for Mobley, Allen, and picks for Tobias, and we were whining about the Clippers not wanting to trade Man in a deal for Harden? I want to be clear, because I said this at the time, that trade is not legal in the NBA, so it is not an accurate report at the time it was made. And I said as much in some less friendly terms that I was also going to say on the podcast, and I'm going to just save it for today. So let's just say that I don't believe that was a real thing.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
It just, and even just the CBA legality of it, it just didn't pass the smell test at all.
We got some other. So Dave asked if Maxi's going to be an all-star. He's had a great opportunity.
He'll have the ball enough, yeah. No, I think if, we've spoken a lot about his playmaking, and that's our key. But if he has a ball enough to score 25 per game, he certainly has a chance. It's always tough as a guard to make an all-star because there's good depth. Maybe the East doesn't have quite as much depth as it had in prior years. especially if James Harden's moved out, Kyrie's out in the West. Like there's a little bit of movement around in those positions. He certainly has a chance. I don't necessarily worry too much because like if a guy's a top 4 guard in the East or top 5, I don't really care too much. I care much more about the development they've made and how that impacts winning and how that impacts how they fit on the team. But he certainly has a good chance. I don't know if would you if you had to put it above or below 50%. I don't think I'd go above 50%.
No,
but he certainly has a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of the perfect storm of when we see young guys leap to all-star level. He's year 4, so he's got plenty of experience now. There's going to be a lot of shot opportunities that maybe wouldn't have been there if Harden was full-time on the roster. And that's probably going to be true even if they make a trade for, I don't know, a wing or another off guard, a bigger off guard to play with him. There's just going to be more opportunities for Tyrese. I think there's momentum behind him already in the media, which is a thing that shouldn't really matter, but he's going to get a lot of push because frankly, people like him a lot. And I'm not talking about people like you and I, Derek. I'm saying the national shows, people who are observing the league and the bigger picture, love this kid and are expecting big things from him. And when you can live up to those expectations and you hit that bar that people are setting for you, people want to reward you. And people want to reward people like Tyrese. And I know that the media component of it is only part of it. But apply that same logic to, the players around the league. They all respect Tyrese and can see this kid on the rise. Certainly the fans love him for, number one, he's exciting. Number 2, he's just a genuinely great dude who is fun to root for. And I could see him making it. I wouldn't bet on it, but I certainly am not ruling it out by any stretch.
All right, one more here from the 2-minute warning, asking whether a buyout is a real possibility with Harden. No.
It would have to get, and I know Harden has made it ugly before in other stops. It would have to get so unbelievably toxic that I can't even fathom what that would take to get there.
Yeah, here's why. First of all, Sixers aren't going to want it because they're going to want to get some value for him, whether that's settling now or holding on to him until the deadline. Harden's not going to want it because then he has no real way of earning a big contract next summer if a team doesn't have his bird rights. So it doesn't really help either side. If it gets to the point where Harden is a threat to be cut, he would almost have to dial back his bullshit because that's the only that's the nuclear option for him would be cutting him. It would really hurt his earning potential. He can't cross that much of a line or cross the line that far and still get what he wants. No, there's no real chance.
Yeah,
It would have to go in so
try
many...
to invent a scenario that would lead Daryl to cut James outright.
I couldn't. They're both stubborn
I was
enough.
going to make an off-color joke that I'll save for off air. I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, so Daryl, even if Daryl had to take a well below market deal, if this gets to the point where it's just like, get this guy out of here for some big expiring contract of a guy that will play 10 minutes a game instead of nothing, he would do that, I think, before just trading or cutting him outright.
I agree. All right. I think that's all I have. Kyle, do you want to thank the fine people in chat so I can get on my way and get home?
There are so many of them that it's going to be difficult.
The start of the Phillies game because I'm kind of in a tight...
But yeah, thank you to Randy. Thank you to
not really
Marsha
Randy.
Lynch.
No. He doesn't get credit today because he did make fun of what we're wearing.
No. That was Ronald.
Oh,
Get it
right.
right.
I apologize,
So
Randy.
Thank you to Ronald, who's hating on our attire on the show. Thank you to Wallace, Dave P, Lee. I can never pronounce RIJZ, so I'm just going to say RIJZ Live. Marty, Vince, Spiral, Ash, Will, obviously my guy, Nico. Thank you guys, as always, every day for rocking with us. On your way out, if you could hit that thumbs up button on the video, hit the subscribe. You can also get notifications, so you get it for all our shows, but certainly importantly for Derek and I. And we will catch you guys after the Sixers-Hawks game on Friday night. Let's hope that Joel plays and there's something exciting to talk about.
We all silly like the man.